I feel like they all could probably play in the medium dark sandbox. Something strange is afoot at the Circle K, my friends. Who was I and what really happened? I can't hold up these fingers without my pinky up. Protected. She's sort of the very dark and messed up version of Evelyn Hugo with all of her husbands. That was not a real sentence, but you know what I mean. Okay. Hi everybody, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse, and welcome to part 2 of thriller recommendations, medium. So if you saw part 1, it was light. There is a part 3 coming called dark. So we are doing light, medium, dark thriller recommendations based on requests from you guys. I had a hard time, I would say, narrowing down. I feel like light and a half, medium, one like half a toast, and then dark. Again, my version of medium might be different than your version of medium, but we're all doing this in good fun, and hopefully you will find something within this pile of books that you are excited about. I tried to steer clear of really dark things. Let's see how I did. Okay, first book I have is The Hunting Wives by May Cobb. If you tuned into the podcast I did with Kate on Book Wild, where we talked about messy reality TV shows, I talked about this book. I love the dark messiness of these women. All of these books have an overarching darkness, again, just different shades of dark. And in my book, this is medium dark. It is messy, desperate housewives, real housewives, set in Texas. They drink too much, they make bad choices, which makes for a great book. And I loved everything about it. This is a book that I firmly believe too much happens right here. I would not read the full sidebar on this one. Our main character in this is Sophie O'Neill. She has left her big city life in Chicago, and her husband and her young son have come to Texas to settle in this small town. So small community, the moms are all very well connected already, and Sophie is finding her way into this group of kind of the perfect, beautiful women in her town. And things are not what they seem on the surface. She meets Margot Banks, who is an alluring socialite, who is also part of the elite clique, secretly known as the Hunting Wives. And Sophie is totally drawn to Margot and swept into this mysterious clique of women and gets pulled into their universe, so to speak. And this book does one of the things that I love a ton in a thriller is that on page 1 we know that somebody's going to be dead, and then somebody's dead, and then we go back in time to find out the who, what, when, where, why, how, and I love it. So this is definitely rich women behaving badly. Lots of choices are made in this, and I had such fun with this. It's frothy, it's delicious, it's bingey. I loved it. My first May Cobb book. I love that she continues to change and elevate what she's doing, and like just constantly builds these great characters, these complex women. There is frothy fun to this, but there's also so much going on beneath the surface. And I think if you have already been in the genre for a bit and you're looking for a little bit of darker fare, this would be for you. The next book I picked, this is actually the only YA book I have on the list. And I am someone who, and it's the Agathas, this is by Kathleen Glasgow and Liz Lawson. And when I was going through my list, I definitely gravitate towards a handful of YA books. And they all definitely tend to have a little bit of darkness to them. And the Agathas is one of those books where I feel like I don't really talk about it a lot, but I really loved it. And I think it got overshadowed by Good Girls, and I talk about the Inheritance Game series, and I talk about Truly Devious a lot of the time, which is all a lot of fun. But there's so much goodness to this book. So to me, this is kind of light plus in that it is YA, so you're not getting a lot of sort of mature adult content, but it's not without some darker themes to it, which, if I tell you what they are, it's going to spoil part of the plot line, but there is some weightiness and darkness to this, and I really loved it. So I am a huge Agatha Christie fan. I have not been doing a good job on my Agatha Christie's, but I'm working on it, and I had really fun time with this. So this is two teenagers And it says, last summer, Alice Ogilvy's basketball star boyfriend, Steve, dumped her. Then she disappeared for 5 days. She's not talking about where she was, what happened, or anything. And she is the biggest mystery in Castle Cove. Which I know now is not a Murder, She Wrote wink, but in my head, it's still a Murder, She Wrote wink. So she's back in town, kind of been isolated by all of her friends, including her former bestie, Brooke, who is now dating her ex, Steve. So yes, there is some teenage drama to this book. And then Alice winds up getting partnered with Iris as her tutor, and the two girls form an unlikely friendship, but the biggest of it all is Brooke winds up going missing. Steve becomes a prime suspect as the boyfriend, and Alice and Iris start to investigate what happened. And Alice is an Agatha Christie diehard. She's using her Agatha Christie skills to help figure stuff out. Iris is wicked smart. She's got some great friends in her group, so we get a bit of a found family vibe to it. And it's just great fun. But again, there are some weightier topics that are thrown into it, which is why I put it not totally cozy, but not Dark Betty. It's just fantastic. I loved it. I read the second book too, The Night in Question. I also loved that one as well. There's just something about these characters that I really, really enjoyed, and I will continue to read in the series. I hope there's more coming. I had a really good time with it. So that is my one YA recommendation for all 3 videos, because I already know what I'm doing in video 3. And then my next recommendation here is Shiver by Ali Reynolds. This was one of my favorite books of 2022. I was like, let me remind myself when I read it. It was also one of the first books I read that year. I devoured this thing, and I will recommend it to anybody who listens. Isolated and then there were none vibe to it. Past and present timelines, complicated friend group. It has some romance in it, which I never seek out in a thriller. And this was a case of, I didn't know I needed it, and then I wanted more of it. It's so expertly done in this book. Great characters. I was so invested in the story. I was so invested in these characters. And this is a reunion weekend in the French Alps. It is a group of snowboarders. And originally I was like, I don't really know anything about snowboarding. I feel like I was on the snowboard in this book. Ali Reynolds herself is a snowboarder. She takes you on the ice, on the jumps. You feel every crash, you feel every bruise, you feel every exhaustive training that they go through. They are all Olympic hopefuls. 10 years ago, they met in the French Alps as they were all training for the Olympics. And they were a super tight-knit group, but one of the members of their group, Saskia, went missing at the end of that time 10 years ago. So they've all been invited back to the place where it all happened to reunite, sort of in memory of Saskia. What they find out at the beginning of the book, what we find out in the beginning of the book, in a very and then there were none vibe, is they were all lured there for a reason. And I loved it. I loved it. I binged the heck out of this thing. Did I already say that? I loved it. This is another one that is on my unofficial reread list. A debut, so incredibly well written. Again, the dual timelines, I'm working myself into a twist trying to get mine right. This is a great model of how to do it right, how to build compelling characters, a group of friends. They are so individual, they are so unique. You can be easily invested in all of them because of the characters she has created. And I just loved it. Did I mention that I loved it? I absolutely loved it. I still need to read her second book, The Bay. It's buried back here, which has nothing to do with this one. But there's enough dark, overarching stuff happening in here that it could be an intro thriller, but I feel like there's some added darkness that just kind of pushes it into this category. Read it. Read it, read it, read it. So good. Okay. Next up, I have The Last Flight by Julie Clark. This was another book that I loved when I read it. I read it really, really quickly, and we get not exactly a strangers on a plane vibe to it. This is 2 women who meet at the airport who are both trying to escape their lives, and they decide to swap tickets, and then one plane goes down and crashes, and the other reaches its destination. So we are following one woman who reaches her destination, and we are following another woman up until she gets to the airport, and we have to figure out what they are running away from, like what is going on. And for our character who lands and walks into the other person's life, she starts to find out what that woman was trying to get away from. It's really hard to talk about without talking about it, but there is definitely, again, some overarching darkness to this. It also, this is where it gets tricky for me, because I feel like if you've read some thrillers, you're probably looking for a little bit more. And if you're new to thrillers, this might be a little bit much as an intro. I don't know. This is where I feel like my barometer is off on this kind of a thing. I'm putting it in this category because here we are. You've already seen the first video. But I think she did such a fantastic job with this. She accomplishes so much in a tight book. And I was very in. And it's one of these books, plays 1000% fair, and a book that very much at the end you're like, like you can already see the breadcrumbs, or in retrospect you can see the breadcrumbs, and I loved it. I think she did a fantastic job with this. I am remiss on reading more Julie Clark, not because I don't want to, but just because choices are made and I'm me and shiny new bright things. But I think this was a fantastic book. I love how it was written. I love like the leading up to and then the after timeline. It was just really smart, like a really smart concept, and I loved it. I really, really loved it. I thought it was so well done. I go back and look at these books and I'm like, oh, that's right. This book is amazing too. If you have not yet read it, must read, must read, must read. Okay, let me talk about a book I read earlier this year. First Light Wins by Ashley Elston. I know this was everywhere, and I know this was getting all the love, and it absolutely deserves all the love. This is a con book. This is a super strong woman who I absolutely loved, and I, again, was fully invested. I feel like this could tilt a little bit towards the medium dark side of things, but also such an easily accessible, bingeable book to someone who is new or new-ish to the thriller genre, or someone who just isn't interested in dark and messed up. We'll get there in the next video. And who's just looking for a solid read with great characters that will pull you right in and kind of not let go. I love it when there's so much buzz about a book and then it just does not disappoint. Like the buzz was real on this one. This book earned every buzz I heard about it. That was not a real sentence, but you know what I mean. Okay, in this one we're following Evie Porter, and it says she has everything a nice Southern girl could want: a doting boyfriend, a house with a white picket fence, a tight group of friends. The only catch is Evie Porter doesn't exist. So Evie works for the elusive Mr. Smith, and she gets a location, she gets a mark, and then she gets her job. And she never quite knows what she's getting into until she's already there. And she doesn't know who Mr. Smith is. And we find out through past and present timelines how she got into the biz. We find out about her current con that she's working on. And I just loved Evie so much. And the best like hitchy hitch for Evie in this one is things really start to get weird when she meets a woman at a party who has her real name and her real identity, which is something that Evie has protected this entire time, because she dreams of being able to leave this life and go back to the life she had. But when somebody shows up as her, something definitely weird is afoot. Something strange is afoot at the Circle K, my friends. And you need to read it to find out what it is. I loved it. She's with her doting boyfriend. There's a bit of a romance to this. It's really about Evie and her story, and just smart, fantastic female main character. I loved everything about her. I thought the writing was great. Ashley Elston, let me remind myself, this is her first adult thriller. She's written 6 YA novels, so this is her adult debut. And wow, did she just crush everything about this book. I loved it. Couldn't recommend it enough. Okay, another author that I love who kind of fits into medium, dark, and I had to pick one. So I picked The Heiress by Rachel Hawkins. I really feel like you can't go wrong with any of her books. I would say maybe Reckless Girls, maybe darker, The Wife Upstairs probably could squarely sit in this category. It's a Jane Eyre retelling, modern retelling set in Alabama. And there's some very wicked moments in that book, probably more on par with like The Hunting Wives. And then The Villa, which was her third book, which has a dark and messed up female friendship. Probably, I feel like they all could probably play in the medium dark sandbox. But again, I picked The Heiress because it was the most recent one I read, and I just loved it. Part of what I loved about this was the actual style storytelling devices that she used in this book. So again, we get some past and present timelines, but we're getting letters in the past, we're getting some news reports, we're getting newspaper clippings, and then we've got just a host of, this is probably more on the darker side. I don't know. It's totally fine. Some darker characters in this. If you've read Rachel Hawkins, you know what you're in for. And I was just all in on this book. It was delightful. It was absolutely delightful. Okay. I'm reading a little bit of like the official synopsis because I'm really trying not to give you too much. And also there's no way I would be able to remember this name off the top of my head. When Ruby McTavish Callahan Woodward Miller Kenmore dies, she's not only North Carolina's richest woman, she's also its most notorious. She was the victim of a famous kidnapping as a child and a widow 4 times over. Ruby ruled the tiny town of Tavistock from Ashby House, her family's estate high in the Blue Ridge Mountains. So after her death, her adopted son Camden inherits everything, and he wants nothing to do with Ruby's fortune, with the remaining family, because she has remaining family. She just gave it all to her son. She wants nothing to do with the house, with the town, with anything. He has moved across the country. He is happily married. He is living his own best life. And then, as it happens in a thriller, when the book opens, something happens that forces him to make the reluctant return home. And he has to confront all of those family members and confront this life that he tried to leave behind. So we are getting Camden and his wife in the present, and his wife is like, wait, what? Like, you where? This crazy family, this is what we're going back to? And then we are seeing Ruby's POV through letters that she is writing, talking about her past. And she's sort of the very dark and messed up version of Evelyn Hugo with all of her husbands. Because Ruby's been widowed all the time. And she's got some nicknames in the press, and she's got some judgment hanging over her head. She really, really does. So this is about how Cam and his wife Jules cope with it, what happens, deliciously dark and messed up things in this book. And again, I loved it. It is short, it is quick, it is fantastic. You can binge it. I feel like it's a really good slump buster. Ashley Elston is also a really good slump buster, so you can't go wrong with these books. Can't. And I love them both. That's why they're here. Okay, last one. A book I haven't talked about in a while that I was starting to feel sentimental for, and I'm not even sure why, but this is Every Last Fear by Alex Finley. I think because his new book comes out at the end of the month, and I was working on my May new releases, and was starting to think about my journey with Alex Finley. I have not yet read his new book, so at this point I will say this is my favorite of all of his books. I've read them all. This is still a sentimental favorite of mine, and to me, sharp, great premise, really well written. There were great characters in this. I love, again, the dual timelines. The entire concept of this book is what drew me in to him. So Alex Finley is a pseudonym. He has written other books under his real name. Don't ask me what they are off the top of my head, but this is his first Alex Finley book. So kind of like a Riley Sager situation. So it's a debut, but not really a debut. So if I keep calling it his debut, that's just context. Anyway, the first line of this book, and I remember, this is going to kill me. I remember listening to an interview with him when he talked about coming up with this line, but I don't remember the who, what, when, where, why, of like where he came up with this line. Before I read the line, he is one of these people, if you want to blow my mind, he lives, I want to say outside DC. This is pre-pandemic, used to commute into DC to work. He's an attorney on the subway, on the metro. I'm not going to get it right. It's the commuter rail here. And he would write on his phone. I mean, I can text, but writing a book on your phone, I was trying to do it on an iPad when I was commuting pre-pandemic. it on his phone. And during the pandemic, he would go for walks and write on his phone, like type it, not even talk into it. I tried to do that. It didn't work. It didn't work. Okay. The first line of this book is, they found the bodies on a Tuesday. I feel like that's all you need to know. But after a late night of partying, NYU student Matt Pine returns to his dorm room to devastating news. Nearly his entire family, his mom, dad, little brother, and sister, have been found dead from an apparent gas leak while vacationing in Mexico. Local police claim it was an accident, but the FBI and State Department seem far less certain, but they won't tell Matt why. This is not the first tragedy to strike Matt's family. So a few years ago, they were thrust into the media spotlight when his older brother, Danny, was convicted for the murder of his teenage girlfriend, Charlotte, and he's currently serving a life sentence. He was the subject of a viral true crime documentary suggesting that Danny was wrongfully convicted. And there are a lot of people rallying behind Danny. There's a lot of controversy around this family. The question becomes, was this an accident? Was this just a terrible tragedy? Is somebody out to get this family? And what really happened? I can't hold up these fingers without my pinky up. What really happened? There's 4 things. What really happened with Danny and his girlfriend Charlotte that night? I have questions. I know the answers because I read the book. I loved it. I really, really loved it. I binged this. This is when I was real good, and I would keep the dates, like how many pages I read every day in the front of my book. Who was I? I read this book in 4 days, and I gave it 4 stars. I really had a fun time with it. Not perfect, but perfectly fun, perfectly twisty, and I love the documentary element. I love the dual timelines. I love Matt being forced to return home. Not that I love that he was forced to return home for a whole bunch of funerals, but forced to return home and sort of confront what everybody is saying about him and his family, what everybody is still saying about his brother, and then like what really happened. It's just really, really good. It's really, really good. And what a great introduction to Alex Finley as an author. And all of his books are standalones, but there is a character in this book who does appear in book number 2. I'm trying to think if they appear in book number 3. I need to fact check myself on that. Definitely appear in book number 2 though, but still my favorite. I will let you know about his newest one when I read it. And again, if you've been in the thriller genre for a bit, but are looking for a little bit more dark and messed up, give it a go. Give it a go. Okay. That is going to be it for me today. That is the go I'm giving you guys. Let me know, as we did in video number 1, what are your recommendations for a medium darkness thriller? What would you recommend to everybody else here in the group? Some of your favorites, or maybe some books that you've heard about and haven't even read yet. That's totally cool. Just looking for some suggestions. And I would love to know what you consider medium darkness in a thriller. And again, everybody's got different things that they love and like and don't like and need and get drawn to. I don't think there's a one size fits all for this, but for me, this is my version of medium. All right. I will see you guys in the next video, whenever that is and whatever that is. TBD, TBD, TBD at the time of me filming this, but I will see you in that one. And until I see you in that one, take good care, everybody, and I will talk to you soon. Bye, guys.